I got a pretty interesting thing here that I found. For my day job, I do construction, and I was renovating. I'm working on renovating a house, and actually this came out of a garage here, but I was doing tearing down some old soffits and stuff, and I found this map here, kind of tucked away up in top of the soffit. So I imagine that at some point in, back in the day, somebody sat it up there. Maybe some kid put it up there or something, who knows. But it was all folded up really nice. Had a little bit of water damage. So you get a little bit of mold and stuff at the bottom. But anyways, it is from 1963, 64 oil field refinery map. Obviously it has the title there, oil and gas fields. And I live in Alberta, so I found this really interesting because, as you can see, Alberta has, even back then, the majority of any kind of oil and gas activity. And a couple of interesting things that I wanted to point out, and some of you older folks might remember this kind of era. I obviously don't. I was born in 98, so. But there's a couple interesting things. So right now, if you're in Alberta, you kind of think of, when you hear oil fields, probably the first thing that comes to your mind is Fort McMurray. But what's interesting is that literally, no pun intended, is not even on the map. And even down here, it's not listed. And Fort Mac is right up in here. So there's tar sands up here, Athabasca tar sands, which I think is kind of synonymous with the Fort McMurray tar sands. If I'm getting any of my lingo wrong or anything, or my terminology, you could mention something in the comments. But what's really interesting is it shows you, current oil pipelines, proposed oil pipelines. This one here, I would be pretty surprised. I think this one is current. I would have to imagine, just because there's so much activity up in the tar sands. It might be a little bit more dead now, but there certainly has been in recent years. I'm not up to date on all that. Shows you gas fields, obviously. So I live in just outside of Edmonton. Actually, I live kind of right between Edmonton and Fort Saskatchewan. And Fort Saskatchewan is a since the 60s, there's been a lot of development with refineries. If I'm not mistaken, some petrochemical plants, some new ones. In recent memory, there's a lot of stuff going in. Unfortunately, I didn't really pay attention to the news too much to know the specifics, but there was a lot that went in there. But even back then, quite a bit. But the most interesting to me is this is kind of a hotbed right now for oil activity. And I think, obviously back then, if anybody who knows more than me wants to chime in on the comments, but if I'm not mistaken, this is not so much active. It's more farther north in Alberta now, obviously with the exception of, some refineries and stuff. But I'd be interested if anybody wants to chime in on that. The other interesting thing is, I don't know if I got really bad information or if the news, the news is accurate or not, but I was under the impression, and what I've heard is that, and it might have been more from people firsthand information, but I was always told that we do not have natural gas processing capabilities in Alberta. So with current sentiments of Alberta separation and stuff like that, I think I've heard the argument come up more than once. That's like, well, we can't process our own natural gas. But either that's not, potentially not true anymore, which is hard to believe, because if you look on the map from 63, it's just speckled with natural gas processing plants. You know, Nanaimo, for those around Edmonton, Morinville, Nanaimo, Bon Accord, Leduc. Well, obviously, Leduc is a huge historical site for Alberta, oil in Alberta. But yeah, that's interesting. And then there's obviously proposed natural gas, which I saw a few here, a couple around Olds and Carstairs. There's a tying back to the exteriors, there's one of our siding manufacturers, Vinyl, which obviously is petrochemical type of stuff, is they have a manufacturing plant in Carstairs. It's K-Can siding. So I don't know if that's active or how that would play in with all this. One up here by Berlin River, never heard of that. So, and then, yeah, a lot of proposed pipelines. There's a couple proposed natural gas pipelines. Trying to think. The orange. Okay, products line. I almost thought somebody sketched that in, but that's a product line. Not sure what that means. But yeah, anyways, I thought it was really interesting. And then here it has, so here's the refineries with 12,500 barrels per day capacity. And then up here, it's 1031.0, I guess. So you have one up in, which this map, I guess, does not show maybe, but it, northern, and that might not be the location. That might just be, you know, the convenient location that they placed in. That's probably what it is. But anyways, that's kind of interesting. Then you have some product line here in Alaska going to Haines, British Columbia. Looks like Norman Wells. I've heard of that. I actually have a friend who I think is currently working as a doctor up there, a fly in and fly out kind of scenario, as is typical up north. Newfoundland, of course, there's a lot of offshore. One, you know, more recent history, 80s and stuff. There's a lot of offshore drilling. Some of you older folks might remember there was a offshore rig that I think I'm not sure what the disaster was, but like I think everybody on it died. I think that was back in the 80s. Another friend of mine from Newfoundland, an older fellow, was telling me about that. But yeah, it's really interesting. And then natural gas pipelines, obviously showing this. A lot of this is completely new to me. I didn't know. Like I hear these terms and stuff, but seeing this map in person is really cool. But I don't know how many of these are active. But obviously you have stuff, Edmonton area. I don't know if that's Fort Saskatchewan or Leduc. I guess that would be, looks like more like Leduc area kind of, or even farther than Leduc. But anyways, those, like, that's going down to Oregon, and it cuts off the map, but that's going into what state is that? Is that California? That would be California there, I think, if I'm not mistaken. Not super good at my geography. Yeah, there's a lot of interesting stuff coming, pipelines coming from Alberta down across the provinces, the western provinces, Ontario, and then into New York, splitting off to Boston, coming down. A oil pipeline coming, you know, all through here, dropping into Minnesota, Michigan. So, like I mentioned, I'll probably be doing a little bit of research into this myself, but I really don't know what of these older lines are still active or have been, you know, kept up to date and stuff like that. But it's kind of interesting. Yeah, the things really stood out to me is as of 63, 64, Fort McMurray was not on this map, at least. I don't know if it was in the works back then, as far as like the oil part goes. And I I was actually going to look at when Fort McMurray was founded. I would imagine it's a little bit older, like, you know, judging by the name, it was probably 1800s type of thing, like a fur trading fort. But I don't know. But I'm obviously, don't quote me on that. That's just wild speculation. But there's some stuff up in Red Earth that was a proposed oil pipeline, and obviously this one from the tar sands, which is a bitumen oil pipeline. Actually, bituminous oil pipeline company. So that maybe is a oil company. I don't know if they're still around or not. But yeah, really interesting. Then the other, this is kind of different, but apparently, I didn't know this, but the Missouri River actually goes into southern Saskatchewan, I guess. Or, no, yeah, that would be southern. I don't know, western Saskatchewan. I don't know what you'd refer to that as, but that's kind of interesting. Obviously, I guess, yeah, that would be western Saskatchewan probably. But that's kind of interesting. And then there's some stuff dropping into Idaho. A lot of interesting, I think it's not marked on the map, but I'm assuming that's referring to railroad lines. Yeah, CNR, Canadian National Rail, Prince George. I just noticed this active exploration. So anyways, really interesting stuff. So hopefully that was interesting, and thanks for watching.